Welcome to the inaugural show of Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury. And I've got the best guest and the best co-host you could ask for in Scott Holler. We'll bring him up in a few minutes. But I did want to say in 2010, Keith Primo and I got involved with Shoot for a Cure. We've been working with them for well over probably 8 years. And in 2010, we decided that we needed to do something more than just spinal cord research with Barry Monroe. We needed to understand that concussions were becoming prevalent. They were just getting more noticed. And we decided that we would write a book, Keith Primo and myself. And I know some people would not take it serious that Kerry Goulet would write a book after passing grade 12 by passing grade 6 twice, but we did. I was asked to do it. Keith and I did it. And it was an incredible journey to find out about our own journey through concussions. Keith's career was ended by concussions. Mine, I got through it, even though I went through darkness, suicidal thoughts, depression, and got through it. And I'm very blessed. And then along the way, we wrote a book called Concussed, and that's what the show is all about. It is an eclectic grouping of information that has been given to us by not only this guy that's coming up, Scott Holler, and his whole entire Shift Concussion Management group, but it's been a worldwide event, understanding concussions from all aspects. We are going to, on this show, talk about not only what a concussion is, what you need to know about it, how it's diagnosed, how dealing with symptoms, once it's diagnosed, managing it. And this is the best guy on the planet. It is Scott Holler from Shift Concussion Management Group. Scotty, how are you?
Good, Kerry. How you doing?
I love the man cave. And listen, this is being presented by the good people at Fired Up Network. Terry Rivard has been working on me for well over a year. Gooch, you got to get your message out there. And you know my story, and I know your story, but a lot of people don't understand the complexity of this injury. And that's why for the first show, I needed to have you on, because I know you can articulate all the things that we need to give people almost like a concussion 101, so that they can understand they're not alone, which is important. I can only attest from the time I was there, going through these, there was a tunnel. It was very dark. I didn't see a light. Thank God I had good people around me. And all the diagnoses back then, it was 1988. We weren't really talking about concussions as much. It was more, you got your bell rung, as you would know. But Scott, I'd like you to just walk through it. Give us a history on concussions, only from your aspect, because you deal with it on a daily basis. But how did it start? How did you get so focused, so laser focused on understanding this invisible injury? And that's what we're trying to understand today.
Yeah, well, first, thank you, obviously, for having me on. We have you asked the question, where did this start? And for me, my background working in sort of orthopedic sport rehab, that's where my career took its start. And then I think for the listeners, having the opportunity, and this is going back, I'm going to say it's 10 or more years ago now, of meeting you and Keith. We were at a Hockey Hall of Fame function. You guys had just started Stop Concussions. It was certainly, something that was, just brought on the radar for, obviously the Sidney Crosby incident that brought this to the forefront. From that meeting, I was very fortunate. I had an opportunity to go down to, down to Pittsburgh, down to the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. I got a great chance to work with one of the best in the industry, and Dr. Mickey Collins. Spent some time down there and quickly realized, one, we had a very, very big problem. But to see what they were doing at that time down there, and to see they were so far ahead of where we were here in Canada, and quickly to realize that they were far ahead of most of the United States in their own, that was really that moment where, for me, it was, this passion grew from. Quickly we started employing these treatment strategies here in Canada. And I think for us, one of the things that really grabbed us early was how many of these cases we were dealing with in a very short window. We started to see that, that the people that were coming through our clinical space a huge majority of these people were coming from, outside of 3-hour radius, outside of province to see us. And I think that moment was one of those. I think the timing was right for me. My daughter was young; she was just getting involved in hockey, and and my involvement in hockey for all these years, and to think of the number of times that I had worked with these different players, and some of the stuff that we would have missed because we just didn't know it at that time, and how much we could have helped them. That was the start for me and for our organization. And and now more than 10 years later, this has become our absolute focus on really building not only a quality management program for those patients that are going through it in our location here in Guelph, but to really take this abroad, take this across Canada. We've worked it throughout Germany, we've worked throughout Australia, into the United States. So, really just trying to make a change in how we do this. We know we can treat this. We know we can assess this injury. We know we can treat this injury. And I think that's been the sort of the body of our focus, for us for, like I said, almost 10 years.
Well, I'll tell you what, I was so blessed to have the opportunity to go down to Pittsburgh with you. I knew I was in very good hands when I heard you and Dr. Mickey Collins talk. You picked up on it right away. It was incredible to watch you two. Obviously, some of the words were a little bit too big for the gooch, so we had to dumb it down a bit. And that's what you've done. You've been able to, I don't want to call it dumb it down. It's not the right terminology, but, not everybody's scholastic. So you have to understand with concussions, once your brain is hurt, things kind of get into these small areas, and it's tough for you to be able to see outside of it. And I just want to say here, Chuck Basti saying, happy debut, Scott Haller. Great to have you here. Congratulations, Gooch, from Jeff Lieberman. Of course, he has said we have to do a lot more and educate people on it. This is so informative. This is so important. Do you know what's really going on about concussions? And something has to be done instead of sweeping it under the rug. And while you got started in it, Scott, we were sweeping a lot of this under the rug. And listen, for people that don't know, Scott is very modest. You are one of the best in the world. We have people flying in from all over the world, as you know, especially with our German contents. Chris Hyde's of the world. There's so many people that you've touched through the virtual, and then obviously they coming here and you helping them. The one thing that I want to say to everybody that's listening, and this has been brought to you by the good people at Fired Up Network, this would have not been able to happen if they didn't step up and say, hey, Gooch, it's time. And now it is time. And that's why I have you on it, because Scott Haller, there are 18,000 white papers written on concussions every year, and you read 18,100 of them. That's how thorough you are in this. And that's very important to understand, because it's ever changing. I want to read you something. I wrote the book with Keith, and you were a big part of it. There's a lot of great information here. It's well over 10 years. So we're on the mission to revamp this or upgrade it. And I know I'll be coming to you and getting your expertise. But this lady actually opened our eyes to it. And I'd like to hear your comment on it. Lynn Perkins had suffered a concussion at work. And as she was going through these, and this was back in, I think it was 1986 or so when she suffered it. And she was sent from place to place. And the end one was she was dealing with depression. They never picked up on the fact that she had damaged her brain. And she wrote this: deep inside, I'm still really me. I have lost my choice about how to be. I am not dumb when I cannot speak. My brain feels tired, weary, and weak. My thoughts disappear. My focus goes. My mind knows not what it even knows. I am not drunk, but I weave and fall. I cannot find my way at all. I am not deaf. I hear too much. I feel pain from human touch. I am not blind, but I cannot see. I have suffered a head injury. And you've had lots of people probably come into you saying, people are telling me I'm crazy. I'm nuts. What do I do? I'd love to hear your comments on that.
Wow, you know what? I mean, I've read the book more than once, and that quote still forever will resonate in not only what the beginning was for us, but our continuation on today. Carrie, you talk about the invisible injury, and it truly is that, and it's one that's really, really hard for people to understand. Certainly, those that are not in it. The invisible injury is clear. I mean, for those patients that are struggling with post concussion syndrome, they look normal. They don't have that visible cast. They don't have crutches. They don't have that visual piece that we can automatically feel. Oh, I feel bad, or I feel sorry, or how are you doing? It is something that's really hard for most patients to articulate to their family, to their parents, to a loved one, to anyone that surrounds them. I mean, for the way that people around them look, it is quite normal, but it's not normal. Simple things become extremely challenging. It is a really, really tough injury. We spend a tremendous amount of time with not only the patients, but the people that are surrounding those patients. There's true support network. Those, husband, wife, partner, mom, dad, aunt, uncle, whoever it is that is that support network of really getting them to understand, what is this patient going through? Why are they dealing with this? Why are these tasks so complicated for them? Why are they unable to get through a day, of regular tasks? This is something that we deal with every single day with every single patient. I mean, every concussion is very unique in its own. It's not classified, as a concussion or a post-concussion syndrome.
Yeah.
It is something that is very, very unique. And as we build not only education plans, but treatment plans and working to get patients back, it's all very, very different. But the one common link for every patient is, they do feel like they are on their own. They feel like no one else can understand it, because they can't articulate it in a way that makes sense. And because they look in the mirror and everything looks normal, except for their world is not normal. It's so far from normal. I think that you mentioned the anxiety, the depression that goes along with this. This is a huge component of this injury, and I think it starts early because they're not able to say that, and people aren't able to understand why they just can't go back to work, or why they can't just get back to doing what they were doing, and that is obviously a big struggle that we have to work with both the patient and anyone that surrounds them.
Hey, listen, we're talking with Scott Holler from Shift Concussion Management. I know we're going to be showing the website. If you are suffering or your loved one is suffering, please reach out to Scott Holler. He's got a tremendous team, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. They've got online learning available for people that want to learn more about this injury. And of course, what we're going to talk about over the next couple of weeks, I know I'll have you on a couple of times throughout the month just to talk about things. It's one thing to understand what a concussion is, because there are variants. There are people, there's certain believe it's almost like conspiracy theories. People think it's this or it's that. You break it down into simple terms so that we all can understand it. And so once you understand the terminology concussion, it's a sexy word for a brain injury. It is a brain injury. And the other part is the understanding of how to have it properly diagnosed. Because over the years, Scott, you have known many people have had issues with it being diagnosed properly, having the proper management of the injury, and then it leading them down a different path. Talk to us about the importance of that first understanding of the concussion as a parent or as a coach, or if it's a car accident and it's somebody just seeing that person going through some changes or suffering from these symptoms. What is the first thing a person should do when they identify either they have themselves suffered something that they don't really understand, or it's a loved one realizing that their loved one is in jeopardy?
Sure. Well, let me step back for a second, because I think that, I mean, one of the things, despite the fact that we've been at this for 10 years, educating, medical rehab professionals, across Canada and globally, there's still so many misconceptions to this. And so let's take a second to just to clear, a couple of those. The term concussion really looks at or is defined as an acceleration deceleration. So it is the brain moving inside of the head. There is pathophysiological events that are occurring within that brain, and those will resolve themselves. Those will, over a period of time, depending on on different age brackets. Our younger generation, our younger population of our youth, they take a little bit longer. Our sort of adult population are a little bit quicker. But those sort of acute pathophysiological processes that are occurring are natural resolution. The patients that we hear that say, I have concussion, they really are struggling from what we call post-concussion syndrome. And now there's different terminologies for this. But these are systems that are affected within the within the body. We look at them as visual systems, vestibular systems, autonomic systems, but different ways in which we can look at these, and they're just not functioning well. And the vast majority of those systems, when they're not functioning well, are what lead to the symptoms that many people have prolongedly. So those chronic patients that are unable to sort of reintegrate back, that simple tasks, grocery stores, doing work around the house, prolonged screen time, increased symptoms with exertion or exercise, those become, very, very different in terms of what we're looking at. I think that when we talk about this, it is one of those that concussion being that acute phase, it's this really prolonged, phase outside of that creates the vast majority of symptoms for patients. When we talk about that, that early stage, so we've had this injury, whether it's been diagnosed by a trainer, a physician, whoever is looking at this patient. I think that one of the things that we've come to learn, and when you reference the fact of the number of research papers that are out there, certainly this is something that I do that we do follow within our organization, and we keep up with all of them. It is forever changing. The body of work is changing. The amount of research is changing. When we go back 10 years ago, it was very much that dark room rest, that type of approach.
Right.
We've come to learn now that is actually that's counterproductive to recovery. That we need to not be stuck in that sort of dark room. Don't use it. Stay there till you're symptom free.
Right.
Those early phases of this injury are saying that yes, a reduction in screen time, a reduction in activity, a reduction in our sort of daily lives is relatively important. What we really want to look at, though, is not being isolated into that dark room. We now know, the research shows that exercise, and when we say exercise, they're talking about simple walking, that getting out for a 30-minute walk once or twice a day, that being somewhat engaged still in your regular routine of your home, but very much reduced, has a huge impact in terms of our recovery times for this.
Right.
So yes, shutting it down, not maybe partaking in that sport or activity, maybe taking a rest from work or from school, but very, very limited, still exercising, still being able to, still engage the mind, is really, really key.
Hey, Scott, I wanted to ask you, I got a call the other night from a good friend of mine, Kelly. His son was playing, he got hit. It was in a soccer game, and he sat at the end of the bench, and the coaches just left him there, didn't do anything. And the mother came down and realized there was an issue. And this is 2021. They went off to the hospital. Basically, that whole scenario, sitting and waiting and waiting and waiting. They finally came out and said, yes, you've suffered a concussion. What I'd like you to do is get your son home, get him to sleep, and wake him up every 3 hours to help him understand, or you can understand if there are any other symptoms. Now, again, I'm not the doctor in the room. I know you're very well educated in it. Is that the proper handling of the situation, if I understand it correctly? Is it not that once they've eliminated that brain bleed by doing the CAT scan and the MRI, that you want that child to get the proper rest? because it will help raise the anxiety level if you're waking them up every 3 hours. Love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, and I think, Kerry, that I mean, those are as much as I would love to believe that over the course of the last 10 years and the amount of research that has come out on concussion and post-concussion syndrome and all the things that go along with it, that we would be doing a better job. It saddens me some days, most days, that we're not. I would say that the vast majority of patients that we see have been given this advice that is so outdated and so incorrect, but yet is still being, is still being used. First, on that particular point, no, that is not the issue. That is not recommended in the current research in terms of, waking anyone up during that time period. Obviously, the issue with not the issue, but the recommendation for CTs and MRIs are to rule out red flag based issues. Those are not important within our sort of triage of these patients. But the sort of old adage that we've had medically, I mean, it still exists. I mean, the research is beyond clear that we shouldn't be stuck in a dark room, that we're not supposed to just shut everything down until we feel better. Unfortunately, it's still something that we're hearing on a regular basis. And, I think as much as some days I feel like the concussion world is certainly what we're doing from an education standpoint is looking, I say it's like pushing water uphill. Yes. One of the things that keeps me going in this is that, and I think, Kira, you were part of me. This is going back many years ago. We were out near Windsor area, and we were doing a presentation to a group of physicians, and it was really interesting because they had a pediatrician there that was speaking on behalf of this, and he was kind of bridging between two presentations that were at the time in there, and he asked the group of physicians in the room. He said. And I didn't know this question was coming myself, but he said, in the field of medicine, he said, if we're looking to make change, he said, how long, once it's ironclad, everything is done, it's double placebo, everything is figured out, this is the way to do it. How long does it take to actually be across the board in Canada as an effective unit, as an effective strategy for treating anything? And he said, is it 1 year? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? Or is it 10? And it just in my mind didn't know the answer, but I'm like, okay, you wipe off 1 because that's too low. The 3 and 5 somewhere in between there, 10 is too high. So I was just gonna go with if in doubt, guess C. But when he informed us that it was an average of 10 years for change to take place once it was solid, it really put into context for me, how long this might be for us to really get there. And then not only is it there, but the research is so forever changing that what you learn today, even if you changed it, it could be, so outdated within a year or 18 months that might be a challenge. Now, I will say this because it's, I'm extremely passionate about this, and I'm very vocal about it because, I want change. And when you get to see what I get to see every day, when you see these patients, when you see the effect it has on their families, on their loved ones, I think if anyone listening could see what I see every day, they would understand my passion. I don't point a finger. I don't point blame. No. But I will say this. I will say that, our medical system has done a terrible job in terms of its isolation. It has its own roles, has its own responsibilities, and it doesn't like to work together, and it doesn't like to play in the same sandbox. I do believe that our healthcare across the front could be so much better if we did work collaboratively, if we did listen, if we did, work with people in certain areas. It's why we have specialties in medicine. It's why we have specialties in all areas of our healthcare system. But for whatever reason, concussion, and this is not a Canadian problem, this is a global problem. It really, really, really is lacking in knowledge. It's lacking in listening to those that believe in it and do it every day passionately. And I speak only from that context in the fact that we need to do better. And for those that wish to argue that, I invite them to my clinic to see the families and the distress that they're in when they're there. I invite them to come through my door and see what I have to see every day and put themselves in that. If that was their child or that was their husband or their wife, how would they feel about this? I think they would. Their opinions would be changed dramatically.
Well, Scotty, you and I work so well together. It's 24/7. My number's out there, my email's out there. As soon as I get somebody and understand what they need, I get in touch with you and you take care of them. And something great has come from our relationship is the fact that our producer today, Jordan LaRoche, would not be here working with us and doing all the great things had his father not reached out, of course. And you did such a great job, and we're very blessed to have that. And there he is. You do important work. The fact that there are still these myths. I know Jeff Lieberman, who is out of LA, has come up with this. Scott, why are people, sports and music parents, not taking this seriously towards concussion? It's still that kind of, if I don't look at it, it won't get me type syndrome. And I think you've gone ahead and really educated people on it, but there still is some resistance. And we're really lucky to hear from Scott Haller, Shift Concussion Management, on this particular topic. What is it, Scott? Why is there still a hesitation to really get into, because we've been doing this for 10 years. There's been advancement, but there still is a lot of people that are resisting it.
Mm-hmm. Well, Kerry, I think two things. One, we've said this a number of times, you and I, in this conversation. If you really want to be, that social introvert and talk to nobody, the simple way to do that is take a concussion banner and put it in a hockey arena, and everybody will exit out the back door, walk around the rink in the rain just to avoid it. I think concussion's been that we don't want to talk about it. It is, if we have this could somehow affect, what tomorrow's game looks like, or can I play in that game? Am I out of this tournament? What does that look like for the scouts that are looking at my children? I think that, twofold with this. One, and I think I can say this. We're looking and we're watching professional sports, and we watch it every Sunday in the NFL. We watch concussion happen. We see it in the Stanley Cup playoffs where it happens, and someone's back out 2 days later, or skating with the team a few days later. I will caution this in saying that there's a big difference. One, I still think that the proper treatment program and process should be taking place no matter where you play. But the reality is that when you get paid to play a sport, it's very different than when you pay to play that sport. And I think the honest problem is that it is parents that just don't want to see this. It is the old school thought process. It is, I had this and I'm fine. And this happened to me and I'm okay. And we're just unwilling to make that change. The number of, and again, for all the kids that are playing sports, there's, the numbers are so off, but the parents that I see, I said this all the way along, the people that I'm seeing, those parents, what they said before their child had this problem versus what they're saying now with their child in it is extremely different. Those parents that are vocal of, why aren't we better educated? Why don't our trainers know more? Why doesn't our league take place? With all due respect, those are the same parents that were saying that we didn't have to worry about this and it's not a problem. And I got a head bump, when I was 12 years old, and look at me, I'm fine. And so I think it's a culture thing, in all honesty. I think it's, Kerry, certainly in sport. Hockey's is closest to me and closest to you. There is that old sort of toughness, right? There's that old culture, like you play, you can have your ankle fractured and you can get injections and you would play. If your hand was fractured, you would play. They'd tape it up. If this was wrong, you'd do it. I think until we really understand the fact that there's a big difference between my ankle and my brain, until we realize that, those people that believe it's not going to happen to me or it's not going to happen to my child, it will take time, and we are making some movement forward in this. I would suggest that we're talking about it a little bit more, but without getting into the specifics of it, just watch the Stanley Cup playoffs of last year, and you can pull out a handful of examples that maybe don't fit what I just described.
and the NFL. And of course, I'm not going to blame my producer here. I put up on the wrong location. We want to try and keep it to 40 minutes. So we've had great time with you. I know we're going to do this a lot. But what I want to ask you now is, of course, we went over to Australia and we now see you've been over there several times, and look at the mess that's over there. And you were over there pounding the drum saying, guys, listen, you got to listen. This was well over 5 years ago. And now they're only coming to 5 years understanding how serious the situation is. And I just read an article. It actually came from Jeff Lieberman that I was reading, where they've now determined there are more concussions in AFL football than they realized. Well, you could have bought me a cup of coffee 5 years ago and I could have told you that, because I was listening to you. Where have we come? Like, how far have we come far enough so that we see the light at the end of the tunnel? We used to really sit on obviously baseline testing. That's kind of come and gone, and it's still out there, but still a little bit confusion. The word CTE is thrown out at us a lot. So people, you've got the calls, I've got the calls. Hey, my son's been hit 2 or 3 times. Will he die of CTE? Those myths and those situations where it almost develops a panic. And I'd love to hear your perspective on where we have come, where we are, and where you think we're going.
Yeah, I think if the question is, have we come far enough? The answer is no. I mean, we know so much. We know so much. The research is out there. Have we applied the research, into sport, into the clinical side? Not enough. Certainly not enough. I think we have a long way to go there. I think that this is not a sprint. My passion for this would have wanted to believe back when we started this that it was more of a sprint than a marathon, but I've come to realize that this is a marathon, and it's just a continuation of of education, of awareness, of all of those, of all of those components. We're in a spot, yes. When we're talking about can we do better, Carrie, you've always heard me say this. I believe, and I get to see some of the worst cases that any parent or any partner would never wish upon for any loved one that they have, and I see it every day. And yet, my daughter plays, hockey. She's contact everything, and people say, well, why do you let her do this? And I always say, I'm not afraid of concussion. Concussion is not what I'm afraid of. I'm afraid of the mismanagement of it. If we manage this injury correctly, then we're in a spot where we don't need to worry about it. I think the issue is the concussion, the medical world, the sport world's afraid of the medical community because the medical community went at the sport world, and the sport world then defends itself and comes back in. And I believe if we really want to make a difference, then those two worlds need to come together and say, is this wrong? Is this right? No, but how do we handle it? What do we look at? How do we make sure that they're best protected? And to me, that is it. And I know that sport, and we talk about it, gets the big rap, but in our office, and we see patients from all over the country, they're not all sport related. I would say that only 60% of ours are sport related. Right. The other ones are car accidents, slip and falls, bike rides, regular life stuff.
Seniors, a lot of issues with seniors.
Absolutely. So when they talk about not playing football or not playing hockey or not doing this, are we not driving? Are we not doing these other things? Are we not going to work? I mean, how do we just eliminate ice here in Canada and we'd be fine? There'd be no slip and falls. It's a silly conversation, but I think we just need to do a better job at understanding what it is, recognizing it, making the right decisions up front, getting the right assessments, and really the right therapy and the right treatment programs put in place for these patients. And then we're really doing what we can do right now. And I say that, and maybe the research changes my opinion in a year or 2 years from now. But currently, right now, the research suggests that that we can manage this injury really, really well with the right knowledge, with the right team around it, with a collaborative approach of care. This is an injury that can be managed relatively well. When you get into the baseline testing, I still believe that baseline testing has value. I don't believe how it cannot have value, and more so than anything is that. When we ask what's still the problem, why is it here? Carrie, we watch those parents who went who had their children, that went to 7 or 8 doctors till they had someone clear them so they could go back and play the following day. So the first 7 doctors said no, and the 8th doctor said yes. And I said to you, we've talked about this a number of times, I'm not sure what bothered me more or was more concerning. The parent that took them to 8 doctors, 7 who said no until they got the 8th one, or the 8th doctor that actually cleared them. Either way, you know what? I think we can do a better job. I think collectively that has to come from sport and medicine and research have to collectively come together to say, how do we do this? And until we get there, we're going to make slow progress in this.
Scott, I could listen to you all night just talk about this. We have had those evenings all around the world, in Melbourne, Australia, and Germany, Hanover, Germany. Don't forget you had a hat trick in that game. But what's really important is that there is a lot of confusion. And, we've got Jordan, who will come up here in a couple of weeks and talk about his journey, because it's so important for other people to hear. He got misdiagnosed, and thank God he came to you. And Scott, we're not here to sell you. You sell yourself in the sense that your stuff, and people need to understand you've got to get the proper diagnosis. That's the most important. Once you get that proper diagnosis, it's then how is it managed? And that's what we're so lucky to have you involved. I wanted to say, obviously, this is our first show. It's called Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury. There is so much. It's such a complex injury, and there's so many parts that we're going to take you through in this journey. So it's really important that we continue on educating people on the cause, effect, consequences, and the management thereof of this injury. Jill Wheatley, I want to say hello. She's listening in all the way from, I would say it's Namaste from Nepal. She's climbing mountains. Incredible. The final question. We've got 3 minutes, and I want to get it from you. Jeff Lieberman's been great. He's asking a lot of questions, and there's one here that's a little bit too long to answer. We will answer it at a later date, but I'm interested to understand this one. It is a really kind of cool question, because our kids, you see them having these headphones on, and constant pounding of the brain, and is there any truth? Because I've read this before. Is there any truth of the fact that loud music can create any issues when dealing with concussions?
Yeah, and I think this is a question that we've heard in the past. As we know it, and the research supports it right now, that there's no direct connection. I mean, when we're talking about concussion, the true definition of it, we have to have that sort of acceleration, deceleration, or rotationary type of component to this injury. I mean, the brain is moving inside of the actual skull itself. So loud music isn't creating that. It goes to really when, we talk about this, and one of the big myths to this, Kerry, is, that I didn't hit my head, or my son or my daughter didn't hit their head. That is more of a whiplash motion. We actually don't have to make contact of the head to create this problem. This is really any type of acceleration, deceleration, in which the head is moving in one direction, the brain moves in the other direction, and it creates this sort of pathophysiological response that we see. The research currently suggests that music, or not that I'm aware of, that music has any effect on this. However, when we start to take a look at those that have had concussion, and then music or auditory components that then could increase symptoms or cause symptoms to increase, yes, I would suggest that we see that and have heard of that.
Well, Scott, I can't thank you enough. Listen, you're watching Concussed, Understanding the Invisible Injury, and I want to thank Robert Wine. He was the actual one that said that concussions are that invisible injury, because he himself, you can see his disability, you understand he's had a brain injury. Yet when you see guys like Keith, pretty tough to understand, this big hulking guy, and a lot of the NFL and AFL guys, you can't really understand, that a concussion has brought them to their knees. Here's a really, sorry, a little bit late to the party. Jill Wheatley, of course, suffered a traumatic brain injury. No head injury could ever be taken too serious, and that's very true. Listen, you've been watching Concussed right here, the understanding of the invisible injury, brought to you by the good people at Fired Up Network. We're going to be on here every Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Scotty, we're going to get you back. Please make sure if you have any questions or any thoughts, you can reach out to me, of course. And here's a great website, www.shiftconcussion.ca. Final part, you've got an amazing team. You've got Kaylin and the rest of the crew. We've got Dr. Bill and Natalie Perkins in Australia. We've got Dave Dale in Germany. You have helped build this network of people. How gratifying it must be for you to know that you are truly making a difference, not just in Guelph, Ontario, but worldwide. I personally want to thank you for all that you've done, but just give us a little bit of an insight how that feels.
Well, you know what, Kerry, one of the interesting parts about where we are today is that, in most business ventures, you sit down and you build a plan and you work through that plan and you review that plan and you readjust the plan. We didn't do that. This was just something that, we had an opportunity. We really passionately fell in love with this. And it didn't take long just to see the impact that you could have on families and how you could affect their lives in a positive manner. And, for me, although there's a business element to everything, what makes me so happy every day is just seeing the difference that it makes, and knowing that if that wasn't there, what would that look like for me? How would that fit in my family? And along the way, this is not possible without just some phenomenal people. Our whole team here in Guelph has just done a great job. But we've been very fortunate around the world to meet just some great people, some people who share that same passion, that same interest. And, this is now where, this is not, and we're in 5-6 years of maybe even more, Kerry, of some of these people who have stayed the course, have wanted to make change within their own country, within their own cities. And you know what, when I look around and I see the number of people that are working as part of our affiliation group, you start to see how many people are positively being affected by that. And I always said, for me, I'm getting a little older in my career now, but what was important to me was to be able to walk away from this space and leave it in a better spot than when I started it. And it's not possible without them. And certainly, and to you and your continued support and everything that you guys have done at Stop Concussion, and Keith's support and everyone within the organization. I mean, thank you, because it takes, it really takes, when they talk about a village to raise a family, it takes all these people to make change, and it takes all these people, and whether it's one life or one family or 1,000, as long as we're making change to some, that's all that's important. And I say that because that's something that you said to me many, many years ago, and I've never forgotten. But it doesn't happen without everybody, and I'm grateful to have an unbelievable group of people that surround this. So thanks to you and everything that you continue to do to help make this change as well.
Well, I thank you, but you know how much I love you and what you do and why you do it, right? It wasn't a business decision. It was a decision to come back and help. All the way from Australia, Danny Walker saying, thank you. Wish Scott was around back in his day. He will stay tuned. We've had great comments. Scott, thank you. I will get you back. Next week, I'm going to talk a little bit about the effects of mental health that comes with, obviously, concussions and the misdiagnosis, but also the anxiety of not knowing. And that's what's great when you go to Shift Concussion Management. We will make sure you have the answers. You want to reach out to us, please do it. We're on Twitter, we're TikToking, we're Facebooking, we're Instagramming, we're doing it all. And I know anytime that I need to reach out to you, Scott, you're always there. Thank you, Scott Haller from Shift Concussion Management.
Thanks, Kerry. Appreciate it.
All right, wrapping it up. Unbelievable. This we could be here for hours and hours, days and days, just getting information that you'll need if you're suffering or a loved one is suffering from a concussion. And please understand, this is not a sports injury. This is an injury that has to be taken serious, whether you fall down a set of steps, fall off a bike, off a skateboard, or have a slip and fall or get into a car accident. You need to make sure you take care of this. I want to say thanks to George. Keep up the great work, George. If you ever need our help, we are certainly here. Jeff Lieberman, thank you for being a part of it. All right, you've been watching the inaugural Concussed Understanding the Invisible Injury, brought to you by the great people at Fired Up Network and the great support that we have from Shift Concussion Management. Good night, and we'll see you next Tuesday.